This is the RunSafe Security Minute. We're here to provide 1-minute security briefs. Today's question is,
Shane, highlight an existing memory-based exploit and how RunSafe would prevent it from working.
Yeah, so for this, we're going to use CVE 2020-8597. It's a vulnerability in a point-to-point protocol daemon, PPPD, and its affects versions 2.4.2 to 2.4.8, which doesn't seem like a large range of software versions to be affected. It's only a bunch of patch releases, but that software doesn't get updated very often. It's a very stable software stack, and as a result is in a lot of embedded Linux distributions, and has been around for 17 years. So kind of crazy that it's lasted for as long as it has, and it got scored as a CVSS v3 9.8, so it's critical, and it's a classic buffer overflow. So what's really kind of interesting about this is if you look at the reported vulnerability, it has some CPEs that are affected. It lists the Point-to-Point Protocol project, which is the open source owner of that software package. And then it lists Wago firmware, Debian, and Ubuntu Linux as being affected. And so, well, if I'm not in any of those places because I know my CPEs, I'm not using any of these software packages, these Linux distributions, then I'm not affected, right? Except there's actually over 19 affected vendors. So if you look at CISA had an advisory for the affected vendors, and at the top of the list you'll see Siemens, you'll see Wind River Linux, Sierra Wireless. This was affected with Yocto, and so Wind River Linux is also affected. OpenWRT, Android even was affected. So a lot of vulnerabilities, or a lot of vulnerable vendors, I should say. And what's really fascinating is it's a simple buffer overflow. In the case of some Yocto and Wind River Linux-based builds, you didn't even have basic protections like compiling the software with position-independent code. So exploitation of this bug is super trivial. There's pretty reliable working exploits online that can be configured pretty straightforward, and an attacker then can use that buffer overflow to take over control of the system. And RunSafe code, because we take away the attacker's ability to use ROP and JOP gadgets when they're exploiting a vulnerability, that buffer overflow still exists, but the attacker then can't run arbitrary code that exists in that process space. So effectively that vulnerability is mitigated by simply deploying RunSafe code for your Yocto builds, for your Wind River Linux builds, or anywhere where you might be using PPPD.